Hey guys, welcome back to the internet. So I'm sure some of you saw that I left some comments on my videos saying that the subreddit is now live. I said I was going to do it at 10k, but honestly I was just getting so tired of looking through hundreds of YouTube comments every day just to try and find a decent story. So this is more for my sake. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to go leave your stories over in that, because today is the last day I'm going to be reading stories from YouTube comments. You know, unless I catch something that I really appreciate. But for the most part, go over there, post your stories. They don't have to be related to any sort of entitled people or pro revenge or anything like that. Just any cool stories you have. But I do still have one other surprise that'll start at 10,000, so get ready for that. But today's YouTube comment story comes from Jennifer Roddy. So I have a good story for you, an entitled mother and retail mix. So I used to work at a local retail store in my town and was working as a cashier. One day, I asked to do returns and go-backs, something I enjoyed doing because I got to walk around the store and get some exercise instead of just standing at the register for 8 hours. I'm almost done with the first cart of returns when I notice a young child, about 10 years old, walking around without his mother or father around. I say hello and ask him if he's okay and where are his parents. He looks at me and says, "My mommy lets me walk around by myself all the time." I'm thinking to myself, what? How irresponsible. He could get kidnapped. I look at him for a second, debating on taking him to his mother, following him around to make sure he was okay, or just leave it alone. I finally decided it was best to leave him with a warning to be careful and leave it at that. Big mistake. About 10 minutes later, a woman with the usual talk to the manager haircut approaches me while I'm helping another customer. She shoves her way past the customer and gets in my face, demanding to know my name. I'm confused until I see the child behind her. She starts yelling at me. "How dare you approach my son and tell him not to break anything? I will be speaking to your manager about this. Don't you dare approach my son ever again." I'm like, "Lady, I told him to be careful. He could easily get snatched up and you would never see him again." She called me a liar and stormed off. I finished my returns and approached my manager myself at the end of my shift. The entitled mother had already spoken to my manager and left. Now, this manager was new and hadn't been at the store very long, so she doesn't know me yet. She asked me what happened and I tell her my side of the story. I then tell her that I was not sorry for trying to protect a young child. She sighs and she says she'll give me a verbal warning, and I tell her that I will leave the company if they try to get me in trouble again for protecting children. I will not allow a child to be harmed, ever. I never saw that mother again. Man, it feels like this mom was very anti-parenting for this child. I'm not gonna teach him what to do, and you can't either. Just let him figure out the world on his own. At least they pulled the "I'm never shopping here again" move, so you'll never have to see him again. Alright, and into the first entitled parent story called "Kid Finds a Bike in My Backyard. Mom Goes Berserk When I Take It Back." So this story starts off with an FAQ. I think I'm going to read that at the end. So backstory, I'm a single parent. I have a beautiful girl that's turning 5 in August. The past year I've been fighting with my ex that tried to keep my kid away from me. Lawyers aren't cheap, and being single doesn't exactly help with my finances. A couple of months ago I won the lawsuit and I finally got to have my kid at home again. For the past few weeks, she was saying she wanted a bicycle, but still recovering from the lawsuit bills, I wasn't able to afford it. Past week, I got my summer bonus, which finally gave me the financial boost I needed. So yesterday, I was finally able to buy my little girl her bike she wanted so badly. I enjoyed my time with her, riding our bikes, but then it was getting time for dinner, which I still had to make. So we head back home and park the bikes in the backyard. We go inside and I start making dinner. After about 10 minutes, I spot movement in the corner of my eye through the kitchen window that's on the side of the house. I see this kid, guessing 6 or 7 years old, just casually strolling by with the brand new bike I just got today. My heart dropped, and I run to the front door hoping I'd catch him before he rides away. I was lucky I did. I yanked the bike out of the kid's hands and freaked out at him saying it was mine and he had no right to just walk into other people's backyards to take things. I was pissed. I forced him to get off my property and set the bike inside my front halfway, thinking it's over. Boy, was I wrong. After comforting my little girl that never saw me this mad, poor thing, I return to the kitchen to continue making dinner. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rings. It's the kid and his evil mother. She says, "You give my boy this bike back. He found it. It's his." I say, "He found it in my backyard. I got it for my kid today. You should try teaching your dang kid some manners. He shouldn't trespass on other people's property to take their things." "Don't tell me how to raise my kids. Give me the bike back or I'm calling the police." I laugh. I say, "Call the police." And I slam the door in her face. By this point, my 4-year-old is crying her eyes out, and I get to comfort her again, as she thinks she's losing her brand new bike. Her sobbing finally over, I try continuing to make dinner yet again. Preparation's done, I'm about to put it all on the stove, and the doorbell. I flip out, storm to the door, violently open it, and get ready to just explode into this lady's face. Guess what? She actually called the cops. I instantly calm down when I see it's the police, and invite one of the 2 officers inside while the other stays with the evil woman. I explain the situation and show him the box the bike came in, along with the receipt that has my name on it. He shrugs and apologizes for the inconvenience, assured me I won't be bothered again. I let him out and close the door with a smug smile on my face. I check the front window to see what's happening, and I see her go into a full tantrum. It ends with her into handcuffs and in the backseat of the patrol car. Bye, Felicia. Don't know what happened to her, and I don't care. I finally finished dinner, and my kid still has her bike. That's all that matters to me. Boy, what a day. And then back to the FAQ. It says, I am the father, as in male. We had potatoes with peas and carrots with sugar for dinner. Yes, I'm the male and knows how to cook. The bike will never be left unattended outside. Yes, I have a sturdy lock. I located and took a picture of the serial number. Man, you can't post a story on Reddit without everyone wanting to know every detail about it. But hey, every happy ending ends with Karen in handcuffs. Alright, we got another entitled parents called Mom and Son Trespass on Private Property to Play Games at My Bar Mitzvah. So a few years ago, I was having my bar mitzvah. A bit of backstory for all you non-Jewish people. A bar mitzvah is a ceremony where you become an adult by reading from the Torah, kind of like the Jewish Bible. You have to memorize a ton of Hebrew, but you get a massive party for doing it. So at my party, my parents let me have a game truck with Smash for Wii U on it, which was awesome because at the time I only had Brawl on my Wii. So I did the ceremony fine and went to the party. The food was really good, but I pretty much skipped it to get to the Wii U. So I started playing on the Wii U with a few cousins when a random kid showed up. He demanded to play on the Wii U, but we told him he had to wait his turn. I was slightly confused because I didn't know him, but I assumed he was a family member's kid. So my cousin left the game so the kid could play, and I asked him where he was from, and he said he was from insert city where we were. I got worried because I knew all my family in this city. So I asked him who I was, because if he knew who I was, that meant he was allowed to be here. But he said he didn't know me. Once the game was over, I asked him to show me where his mom was, so we pointed at a lady who was across the street watching him. I walked over and asked her who she was, and this is where everything went horribly wrong. She says, I live a few blocks down, and me and my kid were walking down when we saw the games, so I decided he could play. I say, actually, that's a game truck for my bar mitzvah. He's not allowed to be here because it's on private property. She says, let's see how real you are. Starts walking over. Why do you care anyway? I say, well, 1, your son would be trespassing and therefore breaking the law, and 2, because it's my bar mitzvah. She says, I don't know what a bar mitzvah is, and I don't believe you. She then went to the game truck and asked the guy running it if it was on private property, and he said yes. She then said that he was lying and decided to go into the synagogue to prove it. She was immediately confronted by security, telling her she had to leave, and she just got super pissed. She says, well, my son is already here, so there's nothing you can do. Ma'am, your son would be trespassing and you have to pay a huge fine. I suggest you leave immediately. Leave before we call the cops. How dare you? My son is a beautiful child that deserves to play games too. You are just harassing me because I am a woman. The security called the police, and they came pretty quickly because they're close by. The cops say, what's going on here? Well, this woman is trespassing on private property. These monsters are discriminating on me and my son because I'm a woman. These disgusting men should get put in jail. After that, I explained to the officers that she was lying, and they were escorted out. A few weeks later again, I was riding home on the bus after helping out at the synagogue and ran into her on the bus. She immediately recognized me and started to try and beat me up. However, she was really weak and was just kicked off the bus. Man, that's 2 for 3 today now that Karens have gotten arrested. Now let's look into number 3 for My Puppy Is Not Community Property. A few years ago, my family was living in an apartment and we decided to get a puppy after our older dog passed away. We brought home our 5-pound ball of fluff, and, of course, the kids in the nearby apartment went crazy for him. When we'd taken him out, they'd all run over to pet him. There were these 2 kids in particular, a brother and sister, that just rubbed me the wrong way. I'd asked them to give Puppy some space to relieve himself before they pet him or to approach him in any certain way as part of his early training. They never listened. One day they knocked on my door asking if Puppy could come out and play. I explained to them I was working and we'd be out later. They started begging and I said no and shut the door. The next day, same thing. This time I watched what apartment they returned to. Another day, and I'm sitting in my living room playing with the puppy on a break, and someone tries to open my door. Knob turning, someone pushing like they could force the door. It was locked. I put the pup in his crate, call 911, and go to check because this person is being really persistent. It's the kids wanting to come in and play with the dog. Now, Mom finally comes over demanding to know what's going on. I informed her that I'd call the police to report a possible attempted robbery or home invasion because our children were trying to force entry into my home. All denial. Police showed up. I tell the officer why I called. He turns to the mother and tells her that I do in fact have a legitimate complaint of harassment and attempted breaking and entering. She turns to me and screams, "This wouldn't be an issue if this selfish lady would just share the puppy." Officer, I have no sharing agreement. Until I brought the puppy home, I had no idea who these two things here were. I also do not intend to share. He belongs to my family. They were trying to force entry into my home. Now, where do I sign my complaint? And will you make sure this office gets a copy? The mom starts crying and telling me I can't do this. I'm horrible and heartless. Yep, I hope your kids have a scared straight moment. They moved not long after that, as did we. It was not really my intention to have this many entitled parents with police involved, but I guess that's what we're getting. Come on, don't you know that once you have a dog, it's pretty much everyone's property. Everyone gets to play with that dog. But you also have to be the one to take care of it and feed it and pay for everything. Alright, now let's move on to our big story from Malicious Compliance called Giving Me Detention Unless I Come In with Appropriate Footwear? Well, okay. So a little important background on me and the teacher in question. Starting with myself, I grew up in a very poor family of 5 with my mother and 3 siblings. I was the textbook case for Asperger's at the time, but was not yet diagnosed, as the psychologist, who had conducted the original diagnosis, had taken a dislike to me because I had told him his joke was stupid, which meant that I was simply not a very nice little boy, rather than autistic. The teacher, who we will henceforth refer to as Mr. Wiggles, after a particularly torturous punishment he loved to dole out during detentions, was an amazing and crazy man, stern to those who lacked discipline but even-handed and genuinely attentive to the needs of every student, as well as having a mean streak almost as large as his deliciously evil sense of humor. So cut to me, 13 years old, in my first year of high school, and desperately autistic, completely without understanding of the common social graces, such as sarcasm. I go into school one day, and with my only good remaining pair of shoes, white trainers with Velcro straps, nothing fancy or brand named, and Mr. Wiggles is having none of it. OP, what do you think you're wearing on your feet? Is it shoes? Very funny. Tomorrow, either come in wearing black shoes per the dress code, or don't come in at all. Paint them if you have to. Well, okay then. At that time, I had never intentionally missed a day of school. If I could avoid it, I would do so, as I was convinced the only way to get out of the grinding poverty was to grow up with perfect grades so I could get into the upper echelons. Sweet naive child that I was, I hatched a plan. So the week before, my mom thought it would be great for a house full of children who enjoyed scribbling on everything in sight to have a wall that it was actually okay for us to draw on. So she went out and bought some chalkboard paint. This stuff basically turns any surface into a functioning chalkboard and is great fun for kids. And adults too, I found. I really recommend it. At this point though, I had another purpose for it. As I said, we were poor. There was no way Mom could afford to pay for a new pair of school shoes for me this month, so I decided, with not a hint of malice in my heart, that dipping my shoes in this stuff would fulfill the only condition laid out by my teacher to a satisfactory degree. The next day, I crinkle into class with my brand spanking new chalkboard shoes, crunching underfoot, sounding for all the world like I had managed to fit maracas between each of my toes. Mr. Wiggles asked me what on earth I was wearing, having already forgotten about the incident the day before since he didn't hold things against his students unless they were serious. I told him exactly what I had done and each logical step in the train of thought that had led me to this point. He laughs his absolute arse off. A very pleasant sound since this man was known to have an amazing sense of humor between the students and staff, and congratulates me on my innovative solution, gesturing to take a seat. After that period, Mr. Wiggles pulled me aside and explained that he'd rather I come in wearing inappropriate footwear than destroy a perfectly serviceable pair of shoes. I guess I understand now why he referred to him as an amazing and crazy man. But those kinds of people are usually pretty cool. And the question of the day is, parents of Reddit, what's something that you think teenagers of Reddit need to hear? Alright, well, for my 10% teenage audience, get ready for some lecturing. Cliques and high school mentality exists forever. Some people just never grow up. And I thought that for most people it's the opposite. I think that most people just kind of forget all about what happened in high school. I mean, I barely even remember any people I went to high school with. Just because you pop out a baby doesn't mean it'll keep your significant other around, and at times it'll make them break up with you. To that part, just because you have the kid doesn't mean it'll unconditionally love you, especially when you're a crappy parent. These are things my idiotic friends had made when we were young. Choosing to get knocked up at a wrong time in life has shaken lives to rumble at points. Yeah, just don't have kids until you're an adult, at least. It only makes your life so much more difficult if you try and rush that kind of thing. There are lots of paths to a successful, happy life, not just the ones that involve straight A's in the Ivy League or other top colleges. Yeah, that is something that I've fought with a lot. I mean, back when I was in high school, I was kind of under the impression that it's like, oh, well, once you finish high school, you just go right into college, you get at least a bachelor's in something, and then you get a job. You know, kind of that old tale that everyone's been telling us for decades. But I think that times have definitely changed, because the more I hear about college, the more it's starting to sound like a scam in a lot of ways. And you're going to be overpaying, and you're not really guaranteed to get anything out of it. Yeah, that's something I would suggest to teenagers, is just look into other paths of life. You don't have to go to college. And the final one, when I was a teenager, I was going through a really rough patch where I felt like I might have depression. I didn't know who to talk to, so I thought I'd ask my doctor about it. I told him I thought I might be depressed and asked if he had any suggestions on what to do. He laughed at me and said, "You're not depressed, you're just a teenager." I never went back to that doctor again, but I also didn't open up to anyone about the way I felt again. I went through a really self-destructive period, following that using drugs, alcohol, and self-harm to cope, and about to flunk out my school, which was one of the best private schools in the city. I was at a really low point, and one night I was set on killing myself. My dog Snoopy convinced me not to, and made me want to try and get better. I finally decided to try and get help again, and after I did, I wished I had done it sooner. My point is, don't be afraid to ask others for help. Wanting to better your mental health is nothing to be ashamed of, even if it might feel that way. Yeah, a lot of the responses in this thread were just talking about, like, you know, if you're depressed, it's nothing to be ashamed of, you can get it all figured out, and just stay away from drugs, don't smoke, don't do any of that, and just stay healthy, that kind of thing. I mean, when it comes to depression, I definitely go through a lot of phases where I'm just completely miserable and I have no idea why, and you just feel like there's nothing in the world that can make you happy. But I've been through so many of those now that I just kind of tell myself, well, I've been through this before, and eventually it ends, so I guess I just gotta wait it out, and things will get better eventually. And I mean, that might not work for everybody, but it's best to not jump into any drastic decisions just because you're having a rough time. And to my advice for teenagers, I know I'm not a parent and I'm only in my mid-20s, but don't try to rush yourself into adulthood. I mean, your childhood up to your teenage years, they're technically like the shortest part of your life. I mean, compare your 18 starting years to, who knows, like 60 or 70 years after that. Like, just enjoy it while you can. Anyways, that does it for today's stories. Once again, if you want your stories to be read in the videos, go ahead and check out the subreddit. It's called Imagine the Internet, because subreddits have a pretty low character limit. Also, don't even be afraid to go just copy and paste a story you posted in the comments over to that board too. So, looking forward to see all of that, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.